thank the Atlanta Contemporary. I've been coming to their shows for almost 20 years now. And sometimes in the early days, that meant a great effort to travel, see the shows, and then leave town, sometimes the same day. So it was a great honor when I got the invite. I mean, and it wasn't to me exactly, but it was to the End project space, to curate a show and to bring in as many people as I could. So what I decided to do back in early, I guess, January 2019, I had a new studio space and I decided to block off 220 square feet and near the entry and just have that for exhibitions. And I had a couple reasons for that, but one is I really wanted a place where artists who haven't, to my mind anyway, to my taste, hadn't gotten the opportunity that I felt that they deserved, and people who were making maybe eccentric work that didn't fit into either the regional or the national marketplace right away. And I said, let's give these people a show if they want. And it's super simple. It's the simplest looking space. For those of you that haven't been there, usually when people come for the first time, they look around and say, is this it? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. And I called it The End because, and Joe Hadden was there helping me doing all the remodeling, but I called it The End because none of the doors in the space were numbered. So when I first started to come in and was talking to the building owners and the landlord and all that, that's just what they always said. He's like, oh, you got the end, or you got the space on the end, or whatever. So I liked it. So I just put the word The End on the door, and then that was the space. So when I got the invitation, that's a little background on what The End project space is. It's in Southwest Atlanta on Murphy Avenue. We've had exhibitions for about a year and almost a year and a half now. Joe Hadden was the first one. But we have Courtney McClellan, Trey Rozelle, Kojo Griffin, Marisa Graziano is the last full show, and Avantika Bawa's show is supposed to be up now, but we had to postpone it. So that's like the basic history. Whenever I got the invite to curate the show, I did have something particular in mind that I thought I would go ahead and share, because I always like that curved space that's right beside the receptionist desk. I forget what the actual name of that gallery is, but I always like that space. And to me, it sort of was an echo of a chapel, some kind of, an off, a side chapel, maybe on a cathedral or something like that. And because it's all artists who have shown or are scheduled to show in the first 2 years of The End, I thought I would say, I call it The End is Near. So that was the reason for the title. It wasn't because of coronavirus. I did not predict that it was going to happen. I am not a prophet in any way, but that was the name, why it was called The End is Near. But I'm thinking in my mind, I'm thinking of it like a little church, and I'm thinking of a street preacher. Like somebody's holding a sign saying The End is near, come and listen to me. Like I went to art school in a time where they thought like the coolest thing you could be would be like a French philosopher. And I didn't think that was terribly cool, but I as time has evolved, I much more like the model of the street preacher as the artist's model, like somebody who's delusional and poor but has this like thing that's unkillable, no matter what obscurity or whoever's, trying to get him to shut up. And so I sort of like that. And so in laying out the show, and there's the image, I was really thinking of, and I asked the artists if they were okay with this. You see Joe Hadden's chemical tank there in the foreground. I was thinking of that as a baptismal pool. Behind it, straight back, is Courtney McClellan's teleprompters. Courtney McClellan, who, by the way, will have a show at the Working Artists Project in Mocha GA next year, or later this year, I mean. And so Courtney was sort of the pulpit. You see high up on the wall, Namwon Choi's tires with the blue rectangles. I was sort of thinking of them as the rose windows on the church. Joe Hadden has one of the pieces that gets pulled from the tank and is put up high right above the Courtney's teleprompter. And I was sort of thinking of it as the Holy Spirit, like the little bird in the Renaissance paintings. And then around the room, I sort of was was using that kind of as a model and a template. Sergio Suarez, the sticks that are sticking up out of the ground represent fire. So there's always, you know, the promise of hellfire. And Sergio designed the shirts as well, which I was so pleased with. And so looking around the space, you have Emily Tomlinson's graphite drawing on the wall that's going to come, it's 30 inches high, but it's going to cover the whole space eventually if she's ever allowed to be back into work. There's a little private confessional hole, I'll call it, which is Marissa's piece that you just see it as a peephole, but that allows you to look back into the office spaces. You see Namwon's tires. You see two of Cayse's drawings, which I was really, that are framed, which I was thinking of as sort of like Giotto at the Arena Chapel, like here's the story. And it continues with like from in a different time period, maybe with Avantika was anchoring the corner back there with two of her architectural pieces. And then Courtney McClellan, photograph and teleprompter, Joe Hadden, tank on the ground, and mixed media piece up high on the wall. I'll let him talk about how those are made a little later. Evie Sala has a drawing of these sort of squirming serpent hands and serpent kind of creatures, which again is, you know, threat of hellfire. Trey Roselle has some paintings, like I was thinking of it sort of fresco, like painted directly on the wall in latex paint. There's a couple more of Sergio's fire sticks, and then Kojo Griffin has basically a text and graphic piece on the wall that I was seeing is just like the church announcement. Like, here's how many attended this week, here's how many we had last week, like all that kind of stuff. So this, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but that was my basic curatorial thought about how I'm going to get all of this stuff in here by all these different, I mean, artists, of which there were many, in this contained space. So that was my idea about how I'm going to organize it. Now I realize I didn't really do the bios for people yet, but I got pulled into talking about the work, but that's okay. But I do want to talk about the people on the panel today. The first one, Vodka Bawa, who some of you might know. She is in Portland, Oregon now, and spends a lot of her time in her hometown of New Delhi in India. But she lived in Atlanta for a long time and in Georgia for quite a while. I'll let her give the exact number of years. But Bawa has an MFA in painting from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, a BFA from the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda in India. She's been in residency, Skowhegan, McDowell, Kochi Biennial Foundation, Gerasi, among others. She's had solo exhibitions at the Schneider Museum in Oregon, Suyama Space in Seattle, Washington, Columbus Museum of Art in Columbus, Georgia, Saltworks Gallery in Atlanta Contemporary here in Atlanta, Nature Morte and Gallery Mascara in India, and White Box, Tilt, and Disjecta in Portland, Oregon. In addition to all that, she's part of the team that launched an online magazine in 2004 called Drain, D-R-A-I-N, which is still there. You can download that at drainmag.com. She's on the board of the Oregon Arts Commissions, and she's an associate professor of fine art at Washington State University in Vancouver. I think I met Bawa on the street in Savannah pushing a bicycle in 1999, and we sort of introduced ourselves to each other and went and had coffee and kind of became friends, you know, immediately, and ever since. The next person is Cayse Cheatham, who has been lurking in the shadows of the art world for some time. But Cayse is a graduate of Yale University. Where'd you go to undergrad, Cayse? Was it Austin?
Kansas City Art Institute.
Good Lord, I was way off. Okay, Kansas City Art Institute. Then went to Yale University. Currently lives in Atlanta, where he makes, as he calls them, eerie landscape-based drawings and paintings, and works at the Zuckerman Museum as part of their crew and team up there. Cayse also spent 10 years as studio manager for Chuck Close in New York City. And as importantly, He played bass guitar for a couple of New York bands during that time that I used to go frequent at clubs in Williamsburg, such as the Charleston, many times.
Oh,
Many times. I'll tell a story at the end. Remind me if I forget, but I'll tell a story about how Cayse and our lives have kind of intertwined for a long time, and we didn't even know it. But I'll get back into that at the end, hopefully. Namwon Choi is based in Savannah, and she got her BFA and MFA in traditional Korean painting from Hongik University in Seoul, Korea in 2002. And for folks who don't know Hongik, I think I can safely say, would you say Namwon the best art school in Seoul?
No.
You would not? What about one of the best?
Okay, move on. Okay,
one of the best. All right, fair enough. She also got an MFA in drawing and painting at Georgia State University in Atlanta in 2014, was where I first saw her work. She's exhibited at the New York Korean Cultural Center, the Los Angeles Korean Cultural Center, the Aqua Art Fair in Miami, the National MFA Wet Paint Biennial Exhibition in Chicago, and at MoCA GA here in Atlanta. Her work was in a show called New Connections at the Korean Cultural Center in Washington, D.C. last summer in 2019, and she was reviewed in the Washington Post, which was really terrific for her and the Korean Cultural Center. Her recent solo exhibition, In Betweenness, showed at Gallery 72 in Atlanta, Open Gallery in Nashville, Tennessee, and Artist Holmes Gallery in Berlin in Germany. Her most recent show, solo exhibition called Blue Distant, opened in October 2019 at Sandler Hudson Gallery in Atlanta, and probably some of you folks saw the show. And she's a professor of foundation studies at Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah. Marisa Graziano is an artist and curator who's raised in Atlanta. Got her BFA in drawing, painting, printmaking from Georgia State University in 2015, then went on to Boston University, where she got her MFA in 2018. Her practice includes installation, painting, video, and performance, all kind of in full power mode. Graziano is also the co-director of a new exhibition space in Brooklyn called Greenhouse, Greene House. And it's a curatorial project space in Fort Greene, thus the green in Greenhouse. And she lives and works in Brooklyn, although now she's sequestered, I think, in North Georgia, waiting for the virus to blow over. Last and not least on the panel today is Joe Hadden. And Joe Hadden is a drawer, a painter, and a printmaker who spent his formative years in Indianapolis, Indiana. He received a BFA from Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, and an MFA from Georgia State University in Atlanta, where he lives and works. His work and dedication to his practice has been acknowledged in many ways, but one of which was he was awarded the Kathleen G. Williams Award of Excellence while at Georgia State University, and received a residency at the Hambidge Center for the Creative Arts. He teaches at Piedmont College in Atlanta while also working as an art handler and a preparator in one of the galleries. And he helped me renovate the space and had the very first exhibition at The End, which was the chemical tanks, which some of you guys can see. And the material in the tank solidifies, hardens, then can be pulled out and put on the wall and exhibited as a rectangular painting. So I've been talking way too much. I would like to turn it over to the folks in the show if possible, and just ask maybe if you could talk a little bit about the work you decided you wanted to put in, and maybe why you thought, this is the work that you'd like to have at Atlanta Contemporary. Anybody want to go first? Oh, one at a time, please. Let's see.
I'm happy to go first.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah. So you have kind of talked about them a bit, but I create my work in these big saltwater tanks. Or most recently, that's what I've been doing. And it's a lot of fast curing resin that is the meat and potatoes of the painting. That's the structure, and then creates the surface that I'll pull out and later paint on. But I just try to keep it really experimental and fun and surprising. There's a lot of wax and different things in there that will grow crystals, and the paintings will continue to change colors and grow in the tank over a couple months, and then outside of the tank once I take them off the wall. And then the color kind of changes based on the tank, what I put in there as far as dyes and things like that. But this current tank right here, which is one of the smaller ones, been looking at the Washoe County, Nevada fly geyser, and trying to base my colors and then like the rules that the landscapes have off of that geyser. So here, this tank will be up for the run of the show, and I'll pull out both of those little chunks of resin, and those will be the start to the next two paintings that I do. The one on the wall above it was the last tank painting that I did.
So even with that short description, you could see why this was interesting to me. And you can kind of see why maybe this type of practice is maybe half a step out of what you see sometimes at galleries and exhibitions in Atlanta. But I thought, that people really need to see this work. And so that's why I was happy to have it at the end. And I was happy when Joe said yes to being the baptismal tank in this show.
Well, I appreciate
none of these combinations of chemicals are poison in any way, right, Joe?
They are, but not in the contemporary. So
okay, all right. Thanks for that little addition at the end.
Yeah, so right now it's just salt water and non-toxic resin. But at home, I try to get like as experimental as possible, mixing different chemicals, and I try to do different techniques with every painting, which I started looking at like the 13 or so surrealist techniques, and then just kind of ran from there, and I've moved into just surprising techniques that I don't know what's going to happen or how it's going to look, but just trying to keep it fun for myself. And then, at the end of it, I'll have an artifact that's kind of this abstract landscape that I can immerse myself in, and hopefully people are interacting with the paintings on the walls and crouching down and looking into the tanks and all of that.
The resulting painting objects are surprisingly durable.
Yeah, we drilled right into the back of them.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so it'll end up being about 3 or 4 inches thick by the end of it. And so normally, like the plan originally with this show was to go in and keep adding resins and dyes and things like that throughout the run of the show, so that it would change quite a bit. But I haven't been able to get back in there, so it's just kind of doing its own thing at the moment. And see what it looks like when I go back in.
And that was, hopefully we'll get a chance for everybody to go back in. But the thought was that your tank would be constantly changing right there in the entry point of the show, and that Emily Tomlinson's drawing will continue to spread out around the perimeter on the wall of the show. So every time you go back, it would look a little different, and it'd be something new that you hadn't seen before.
Joe.
Yeah.
Do you ever use sea monkeys?
I have not used sea monkeys, but I would love to. I don't know how long they'd live in there.
So people know what sea monkeys are? I thought that joke was from 1978.
I'm doing the best I can.
Okay. Since we're talking, sort of moving into the space with the first pieces first, Namwon, do you want to go next? Because this was a brand new thing for you as well, right?
The stack, yes. First, I would like to say thank you to Atlanta Contemporary, and thank you, Craig, for including my piece in the show. I mean, Atlanta Contemporary, my gosh, ever since I lived and work in Atlanta, I mean, it's my dream venue. Come on. So I'm extremely honored. And Atlanta Chosun Daily News, Korean newspaper, they monitor they monitor. They always pay attention at Atlanta Contemporary Art Center artist name listing, and they pay attention if they see any last name they sound like Korean. And they found my name in this group exhibition and interviewed me, which was extremely honored. I mean, Chosun Ilbo Daily News is one of the oldest in Korean newspaper, and then I didn't know they have branch in Atlanta. So yeah, I was very honored, and Atlanta Contemporary Art Center shows are already like featured in Atlanta. I mean, Chosun Daily Korean newspaper in Atlanta branch, so which I'm very, very happy about. This art piece, it's not a tire. It's
Right.
a tire
Sorry.
cast.
Right,
No,
it's a cat. It's not a real tire.
And I actually waited for that opportunity to make me sound like this is not a pipe moment, a great moment, like this is not tire, but not tire.
Can you talk about that process of
Right.
just because it's done so well, it looks just like a tire.
It looks like a tire, but those are really like found objects, scrap tires from from random streets. Collect them. I travel a lot. Everybody drives here in Georgia. I mean, in American, I think that's part of American life. And there's scrap tires are everywhere. And ever since I live in this country, I don't know why, but I find myself living around the place where I have a lot of scrap tires around.
Oh.
Slightly outskirts of main downtown area. So I got to see them a lot. I eventually had a lot of scrap tires for my own traveling. So I started to collect them, and I know there's a lot of potential in there, but I couldn't figure it out what to do. The more I work with it, like I painted on tire, painted off tire, but those are still tire. But I would like it to be a tire, but more than what it is. So I thought I would make a cast up tire. So that looks like a monumental freestanding stacked tire, looks like sort of like a carbon marble. So that was the very first idea. And then I always had a deep appreciation in Van Gogh's writing than a painting. I just love Van Gogh's ideas of his countries and native countries, his families, his self. He always considered himself as a traveler, and he's one time he says in his letter to his brother said that family in native countries perhaps more appealing in imagination. We do fairly well without living in native countries as well as families. It seems to me like I'm a traveler. That sound fair to me. It's something like that. I always that always in my mind, and I've always wanted to make my response to Van Gogh's painting. And then one of my favorite Van Gogh's painting was the painting of boots, those worn out boots. I mean the boots. I mean, I can see like artists walking through diverse landscapes and. Hard labors, coming home with like sweaty feet. I think it's very interesting. They're still like detached from artist's body at the end of the day, but still holds the resemblance of bodies. I think that's very interesting. And I also think of the Guston's, painting of shoes. Even he himself wears shoes. If you can remember the painting, the couple in bed, he was holding paintbrushes and wearing shoes. So it's represent the ideas of artists being a hard workers. So I would like to make a sort of monumental, freestanding, carved marble to really celebrate that side of art making, like labor intensiveness of art making. So that was the very first idea, but there are a lot of technical issues. I'm certainly not a 3D person. I have no idea. I mean, it is way vague. So thanks to Craig, I was eventually able to contact an artist named J.D. Cobb, who's a GSU graduates and who works at the movie industry casting. So he's a master. He just when I explained this project, it says it has to be a fiberglass. So it's a fiberglass and marble dust and resin, so it doesn't shatter. I think it would though, right?
Hopefully not.
It
It's
wouldn't
stayed on the
shatter.
wall since March 12th. So
Right there, yeah. I mean, it wouldn't shatter as, you know, plaster cast, but I think, but still, I think it's much more lightweighted than
yeah.
plaster, and it was beautifully casted. So that was my idea. And on my solo show last October, I stacked them as you would see in the tire place. You know, 3 on the donut and 1 on top. I just stacked them as freestanding pieces, and then Craig saw them, and you know, there might be other sort of possibility to play with that circular shapes of donut shapes in the space of exhibition. And I think he will mention about that. But I like the fact that he transformed his 3D pieces into like 2D, like it's part of painting right now, because he painted the back. I didn't see it. I mean, when he mentioned that it's going to paint blue squares in the back, I thought, yes, that's brilliant. It worked. It's beautiful.
All of it was approved by the artist, by the way. So yes.
Well, but that was so fresh and so nice to work with, you know, curator who sees.
Well, shout out to artists, curators everywhere.
I see the potential of different, like it will see the same work will seem different way. I mean, I think that's really the excellent quality of being a good curator. So yeah, it was beautiful. I loved it. Now that I hear it was part of like Rose Windows, not Rose Garden. I think that's beautiful idea. So that was the very beginning, and yeah, I was hoping to see more tires, if any, you know, exhibition venues, and if my financial the commission, if anything allowed, I would like to explore more of these casting projects hopefully in the future.
Well, thank you for saying yes to this idea. And since we're right on that spot, if you come straight down from the tires, you have Marissa's hole in the wall, the peephole, and I sort of like that placement because we had to kind of place the peephole at a place where we could actually drill through the wall successfully, and I talked to Veronica about that. But I like the idea that if you wanted to lean down and look through the peephole, you felt the tires above you. So it'd be like not necessarily danger, but there would be a little bit of weight hanging right above your head that you kind of had on your mind. Marissa, do you mind telling people about your piece? Because the show you did at the end was by far the most elaborately engineered exhibition that's been there yet, and so I was impressed that you could also do something with a lighter touch that seemed like it carried all the weight of your content.
Right. Well, I've always been interested in the idea of the viewer being on display as much as any of the work in the space, especially the performance that a viewer has whenever they enter a museum or a gallery or any kind of art space. And there's a sort of a performance that comes with that, of looking at the work and sort of behaving in a particular way. The stance that you have, there's an awareness that comes with it, and sort of entering a critical discourse. So I wanted the idea of, well, at the End art space, whenever I made my show, I had built this architecture, these series of walls that created this freestanding room, and then there were 2 peepholes that were positioned in the walls that looked into the interior space. And so in order to go into the interior, you had to sort of walk in these 2.5 foot wide hallways in order to get inside, and positioned through the hallways were these peepholes where you could stop and you could look in. And at one peephole, you could look in and see a painting. And then at another peephole, there was either nothing, or there was potentially a viewer looking at a painting inside of the space. And so I like this idea that as you sort of circle around the space, you're looking in at someone, and there's this, and the viewer is suddenly on display. That interior space becomes a performative space. And then once you enter into that interior, you have the memory of somebody watching you. There's this potential paranoia, but, you know, I approach all of the work in a very playful way. Everything that I do in the studio sort of starts, like the image bank that I have sort of starts from a humorous place. And So as I sort of look for images, or I watch film, or I listen to podcasts, it's always, there's always like a funny element to it. And I think that that sort of humor immediately disarms you to potentially something more, to something like an underbelly that I'm trying to get out. So the first wave is always like, what's going to make me laugh? What's going to disarm me from looking at an image or disarm a viewer? And then the second wave, and there's often this, there's like an erotic element to it, or something a little bit more sinister that might be happening, that suddenly as you're looking at the piece, you become aware of your own projections onto the work. And then the third wave is sort of after the work is finished, and is that what it's actually doing? Is it implicating the viewer in any type of way, so that they're not just sort of a passive participant in viewing work, but they're actually on display, and their reactions and their feelings, and of either like eroticism or their disgust or desire projected onto something, that's suddenly what is heightened. So I think the peoples are always really interesting to me, because you have to go up to it and sort of crouch down sometimes, or like stand up to look through it. And it's this like very playful moment, and where you sort of want to see what's on the other side. And and then often what's on the other side is you become the voyeur, where you're looking at someone that might not be aware that you're looking at them. Especially when we drilled into this space at the Atlanta Contemporary, it looks into one of the private offices, and there's a door that's just off to the left that says staff only. So it's this very like private space that often a viewer or somebody going into the Contemporary wouldn't be allowed to go into, and you know that there's this barrier of no access. And so this peephole sort of allows you this insight of like what's behind the wall, what's in that interior space that you're not able to see. And I've heard that Craig had mentioned that sometimes people get dressed in that space for exhibitions. And so there's this idea that something could be happening back there that you're not supposed to see, whether it's like filing paperwork or something else. And I mean, a peephole has so many different notions already from film. Like the most classic or the most identifiable is Psycho, looking at the peephole and seeing the woman in the shower getting undressed. And that's sort of like a more jagged peephole. But then you have door finders, where it's a way for somebody to look out through a door and see someone without being seen. So you sort of have a glimpse in somewhere without the awareness that you're being looked at. But whenever you put something like that in a museum, you become the viewer that's looking through the peephole suddenly becomes part of the piece. And they're implicated in that way of they're looking at whatever is behind that wall, whether it be innocent or naughty. Just the implications of somebody looking through a peephole, I think, are really heightened there. And putting them under Namwon's piece, I think having the weight of that above your head, both physically and, I mean, hopefully metaphorically in the work. And I think it's really important, and especially being over the piece on the ground as well. There's sort of this like engulfing feeling, but that's always the wave that comes after. I mean, the first wave is like playfully and innocently wanting to just see what's beyond that peephole. So I think that's, I'm interested in sort of that and play that goes back and forth.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. I was really happy with how that turned out. If you don't mind, we'll just keep going around the room. Again, Cayse has his two drawings, ink on paper. You want to tell us a little bit about these, Cayse? Because you've exhibited very intermittently in the last few years, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty non-existent.
Oh, that's not true. I knew you existed.
Yeah, I guess my work is, in comparison to the other works in the show, very traditional. I kind of come to these images through experience being on the road at night and that sort of thing. Some of them are images that I've kind of carried with me since childhood. I want them to be, they're kind of loaded with symbols. Some are universal and some are personal. I want people to look at them and be drawn into them and pull in close. I've always, like I like to say, like the ancient Egyptians, I love to draw. And
That's what you say.
like the ancient
I
Egyptians,
am making a
love
joke.
to draw, you know.
But I do always associate you with someone who wanted to preserve and continue the tradition of drawing. Like it was really important.
I can't imagine not doing it. Part of the reason I don't show more is because I take so long to make work, and I have to work. I have to steal time. I have to get up like 4 a.m. and draw till 6, and then I have to start getting kids off to school and being a husband and getting ready to do my work, make a living. And I kind of, it's about nighttime, and it's about creepy southern landscape. And
you grew up in Texas. I don't know if I mentioned that, but you grew up in.
Yes. Yeah, I was born in Lubbock, Texas, and I grew up in Dallas. And like 16 days after I was born, Buddy Holly's airplane went down, and that comes out in some of the work. You'll see single engine aircraft. And one of my earliest memories is, this is going down a dark place, but
It always does.
The assassination of Kennedy, I was in Dallas when that happened, and I remember vividly it interrupting the cartoon show I was watching on TV. And then later, I was in New York when the Twin Towers fell, and those sort of things just sort of affect me. And my wife, the psychologist, is constantly pointing out that I'm depressed, but I really don't think I am. I think I'm just, night sky. It's like the guy telling his wife, you're as beautiful as the night sky.
Nice. Can I tell the story now about how our paths crossed? It won't be a long story, I swear.
Okay.
The first time I went to grad school at Ohio University, and for some reason, I stumbled across a book in the library there that was just called Who's Who in American Art. And I thought, I should probably flip through that. And it had the names and addresses of artists. And I saw like a handful of artists whose work I really liked. And I wrote I'd be embarrassed to see it now, but I basically wrote just a fan letter. I'd never been to New York. I grew up in West Virginia. I was now in school in Ohio. I sent out these letters saying, I love your work. I'd love to be in New York one day, like whatever. And much to my astonishment, Chuck Close called me at my tiny little apartment in Athens, Ohio. I was on a Friday, and he's like, hello, is Craig there? This is Chuck. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. And so I traveled to New York. I went to Philadelphia and then took the train up to New York. My first trip to New York was going to Chuck Close's studio. And I didn't know he was in a wheelchair at that point. It wasn't like super public knowledge yet. Had the interview to be a studio assistant because he said, I'm going to have to hire somebody. You sent me the letter, so maybe you'd like to do it. So I had the interview, went back to Ohio and waited, and I never heard from him. And so I called him, and I was like, just seeing if you'd made a decision. And he said, oh yeah. He's like, you have another year of school left, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay, don't quit school. I'm going to hire this other guy who just graduated and is finished with school. And that other guy was Cayse. We didn't know each other. And then later on, when I go to hear these punk and garage bands in Brooklyn in the 90s, I met Cayse playing bass for a band called 18, and we finally connected it all together. You met your wife, Tamina, she also worked for Chuck Close.
Right.
Psychologist.
She was his
I went to your wedding and sat behind Chuck while he drank like 6 or 8 Brooklyn lagers. Anyway, I always want to tell that story because there's some karma path where me and Cayse have been sort of like weaving around each other since 1990, but neither of us really knew about it. It's a great story. I'm glad I told it and shared it with you.
Yeah. became aware of it.
He doesn't care about it at all, but I think it's amazing and beautiful. And I love that story.
Oh, no, I was very lucky to work for Chuck. He had a great attitude and about working every day. And even when he would have a full day doing something else, the first thing we did was we'd go to his studio and he would always paint. Even if he just did like 2 or 3 strokes, he worked every day. And that's something I've taken to heart. You know, even if I can only get a couple of lines of a drawing, and I'll do it. And that sort of rigor I find very valuable. And I teach also, and I try to pass that on, that you really should really need to draw.
Well, and your show at the end is going to be in June, so people should look out for that.
Yeah, sure.
All the work is ready, right?
Yeah.
I'm joking. Of course it's not. It's okay. Well, we can come back to, I don't want to cut it short. We can come back, and during the Q&A, we can talk more, because I'm sure, I know that Cayse supports, you know, all the history of cartooning and graphic novels, and, you know, Mort Drucker, who just died, and, you know,
Man, Mort.
all of these folks have been drawing during the 20th century. Can we move to the corner piece? We have Avantika Bawa, and these are, I first thought they were drawings, but they're actually prints. Is that correct?
Yes.
You want to give us a little background about these, like what they're about and where and how they were made?
Sure. And yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for being here. I am zooming in from my studio in Vancouver, Washington, after driving really fast from my home in Portland, Oregon. And being at 9 a.m. on a Saturday wasn't that as hard as I thought it would be, but here I am. As Craig mentioned at the beginning of the talk, I lived in Atlanta and in Georgia for over 10 years. I was in Savannah from 1999 to 2005, where I met Craig and offered him a ride. And then we went to the parking lot and he's like, "You have a bicycle?" I'm like, yeah. I don't know if you remember.
Ride on her bike, like to join her bike that she was riding. I was like, "No thanks, I'm good."
No. So we went and had coffee instead and talked about how awesome wall drawings are. And I think we talked about Arturo Herrera a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And after that, I was like, yeah, this is someone I know who I'll be talking to a lot for a long time. And we've been really good friends since. And yeah, after Savannah, I lived in Atlanta. And while at Atlanta, I was actually even on the board of the Atlanta Contemporary. And
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I believe in its mission and what it has done for contemporary art in the Georgia environment. And I hope, you know, after COVID-19, we can get back to some level of normalcy and ACAC can continue to flourish. All right, so much for my spiel. So what you see in the corner over there are a pair of photo lithographs. The darker one is a litho, a pure litho done on stone, and the other is a photolitho. Both of these are form drawings of the Veterans Memorial Coliseum, which is a building. I don't know if, Veronica, you can get a close-up of them.
Yeah, it may not be possible.
Okay. Yeah, both of these are drawings, form drawings done of a building in Portland where the Portland Trailblazers used to play till the mid-2000s. And it's an iconic building, one that I walk by often while watching games at the Moda Center, which is the current home of the Blazers. So all the nostalgia aside, the building is an architectural gem. It speaks of everything that I'm fascinated by in the built environment: symmetry, modernity, glass, steel, timber. And I decided to start making drawings of this singular building in 2015 and have been obsessively drawing that building till even now. In 2018, I had the opportunity of doing a residency at Crow Shadow Institute for the Arts, which is in Pendleton, Oregon. And I worked with Judith Bauman, an awesome master printer, who said, lithography is a dying art, but if you want to, we will work on it. So we literally got down to the grind and started to unearth a stone that hadn't been used for a long time so that I could draw this building and then print it again and again and again. I'm also wearing a sweatshirt that I designed from the same series that is available at the Motive Center when it does open. And this is what my virtual build image won't allow you to see it. So I'm just going to change this for a second. So you can see what this building actually looks like. So my drawings are different ways of either zooming in. My earlier virtual background was also of the same building, but really zoomed in. The work at the Contemporary is also the same building done as prints. And it's interesting, Craig, that you talked about how you wanted to set this show up like a church, because there's something about the red in that print of mine that's very Russian. And when I was working on it, it reminded me of icons that I would see in Russian houses back in the 90s when I lived in the Soviet Union. And there is a little tradition to creating a church-like space in your own home by placing an icon, a red, shiny biblical image in the corner of your house, preferably the eastern corner. So I don't know if that corner faces the east, but let's pretend it does, because it's my homage to the Atlanta Contemporary Art Center and to architecture that I think is kind of dying out.
I think it does, actually. I think it is an accident.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Malevich, and we did first hang the pieces sort of spanning the two walls, but it didn't quite feel like it was doing the works justice.
No, I think you did a fantastic job with this selection of the.
You're very kind. Were these prints in your show at the Portland Art Museum?
Yes, these were. I had a show in 2018 through 2019 at the Portland Art Museum, and these were part of that series. This little diptych, as were like 15 other iterations of the same work. Interestingly, when Craig asked me to be in this show, he had also asked me to do a solo show at the end, which is what I was supposed to be doing in March. And I think a week before the show opened, we decided to postpone it.
Yeah.
But I like it when there's a little sub-narrative and in how I can connect what I'm doing in a space. So knowing I was going to show at the end, I thought it would be interesting to start reminding Atlanta of the kind of work that I did. So in February, when I had worked at the art auction, I sent one of these prints as well. So I'm like, maybe people in Atlanta will start remembering who I am, and there'll be a familiarity with Avantika and her love for architecture and very kind of brutalist international style architecture. So I gave a little offering of one of these prints at the art auction. Then came the art papers auction. The art papers auction, yeah. And the eventual hope was that it would lead up to the work I want to do at the end. And I don't know if any of you all recognize this building, but this is another structure I have really marveled at for a long time. It's the Georgia Archives that was demolished in 2017, and I've been obsessively drawing this building right now. And this is the building that I was going to use as the inspiration / fodder for the work I was to do at the end. With the whole set. And I will, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know.
It'll just be at a different time, that's all.
Yeah, and it's destroyed. So I like the irony in one building, the Coliseum being a building that was almost demolished, but it survived. This building was a container for archives and is now destroyed. And I was going to show at the end, and I can't because life is kind of semi-demolished right now. So I like all these weird sub-narratives that have occurred in the whole process of trying to re-enter the Georgia art scene since earlier this year.
Well, the Georgia art scene will welcome you anytime. So come back anytime, all the time. And you have a big show in India in the fall that you're preparing for.
That is right. So besides these drawings that are obsessively responding to architecture, I also do a lot of work with scaffolding. And I have a piece at the Sculpture Park, which is a palace in Jaipur the Pink City, Jaipur, Rajasthan, where I'm supposed to build these scaffolds on the roof of a palace. And the only stipulation, one of the main stipulations, is that it has to be monkey resistant. Monkeys jump
That
on
was
it.
also in the contract from the Atlanta Contemporary.
Right.
Monkey resistant works only.
Monkey resistant works only. So hopefully, and this is supposed to happen in September. I hope it will. If it doesn't happen in September, I hope it'll happen at some point in the near future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know we we're got a few minutes left, but I think we can go. I think as long as we need to, really, as long as the audience can endure it. But I wanted to just again say thank you to all the artists, and I say this not in a neutral way, but in a completely biased and personal way, as I really love how the show looks, and I'm so happy with the work that everybody contributed. And they did it sort of not knowing the full story of how I'm trying to put the show together. And I, as a person who organized it, I was extremely pleased with everybody's contribution and how it all turned out. I know that I'm an artist. I'm not a curator. I'm an artist who sometimes, enjoys curating shows. And I try not to do it from any over intellectualized position. I like curators who work in a cinematic way. So the first room of an exhibition might be like the establishing shot, and then you move through it as if it's a film. But I can't do that either. I shamelessly say, without any shame or irony, that I think of it when I curate a show, it's like being a DJ. Like, I just want to put the work together in a new way where everything seems cool and fresh again. And it makes you enjoy the individual pieces even more than you would have if you'd seen them on their own. So for me, like, I felt like this was a very successful DJ set. I was very happy. So thanks everyone for everything you put in. And Evie and Trey and Courtney and Sergio, like, they're not on the panel, but I mean, their contributions were dynamite as well. And I was just so happy, with what everybody did. And Kojo is up there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody have any thoughts or questions for each other? Besides where we can get that sweatshirt that Bob was wearing?
So has everyone seen the show in person besides me? The people in the show?
I think so. Yeah.
So Veronica, please make sure it's still up before you.
Oh, it's still up.
So
I was there. Everything's still there. Everything looks beautiful and great. And I was there on Thursday as essential staff to go check the building, and the show looks beautiful. And yeah, we've extended it through July. So we're hoping that we're back open before July 30th.
I hope so too. Yeah, it's ironic. I was supposed to come to the Contemporary and then go to West Virginia for a wrestling match in March. So my March trip was supposed to be see the show, install at the end, and then go to West Virginia.
You're going to West Virginia to wrestle?
No, I was going to go watch a wrestling show,
Okay.
But it didn't happen.
Well, the opening on March 12th at the Contemporary, like, I was worried that we wouldn't get very many people, because that was right at kind of the tipping point of like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen. We might have to shut down, all these institutions. But we had a good crowd, like, I thought, and people were sporting their T-shirts, which I have mine, thanks to Sergio. And I was super pleased. I thought everybody did great.
I think it was maybe everyone felt it was a bit of a last hurrah before we closed, and
right,
it
before
did
we
seem
collapsed.
imminent. And yeah, that was definitely a night. Yeah.
Well, and
Terry just said the same thing.
Yeah, everybody thought that the show title was because of the virus, but it really had nothing to do with the pandemic or anything. It just was historic fortune.
Maybe you are a prophet and you don't know it, Craig.
Well, that would be great news. I would love that.
But I just, to what you said earlier about being a DJ, I've seen my works installed in so many ways, and I thought I'd seen it in every permutation, but you really did infuse a whole new life in it.
Well, we're trying to, but I had curated a show at Hathaway Gallery last year, earlier in May, called somebody told me you people were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was happy with how that show turned out too, but I really like things low and high in a show. Like I like that. I like that feeling of having something high on the wall and something low on the ground and so forth. So I was happy. We have a lot of artists in the small space, but I feel like everybody fits together almost like puzzle pieces. Like to me, it doesn't feel overly crowded. Maybe if we had one more thing, maybe it would, but I was happy with it.
Yeah, it looks great.
Well, and this is just a little hint, a little catnip for what the Cayse Cheatham show is going to look like in June.
Oh my God.
Cayse, who's your favorite artist who draws?
Ooh.
Oh God, so many. I mean, the first one that jumped into my mind was Jim Nutt, but via Selmans, Chuck Close.
You like all the Tex Avery and all those kind of, animation drawings too, right?
Oh yeah, I did. I worked in animation for a long time because of there's a respect for drawing that I felt the art world lacked, and so I was going to teach you assholes a lesson.
Well, we appreciate it. Was drawing respected at Yale?
Oh yeah. There's a big tradition. It's same with the Kansas City Art Institute. They're very traditional schools. They ruined my life.
I was thinking that was probably true.
Yeah.
Marissa at Boston University. They honor drawing there, right?
Yeah. When I entered the program, we just got the new head of the department, Josephine Halverson, and then we had a new faculty member, Wanju Lim, who was sort of leading the sculpture department, and that was when the programs were joined. And so there was a lot of interaction between painting and sculpture and installation and video and performance. And I mean, Josephine is an incredible painter, and she was really pushing for the love of painting in that program. And then Wanju sort of brought this new genres of sculpture to the program that and sort of gave it new life, I think. And now the programs are separated, so there's painting and sculpture, and they sort of keep their distance a little bit more. But when I was there, I felt like I sort of hit that sweet spot that allowed me to sort of open up the practice. So when I first went in, I was just making oil paintings, and that sort of going in there and having both Josephine and Wanju in my ears really opened everything up for me.
Namwon, what was drawing like? What was your education like at Hong Ik?
It was pretty rigorous drawing training. I mean, we don't do much training in college. We have to do it before college years. So, since probably 7 years, the age we get to learn ABC or alphabet. I mean, we get to train in order to get in college, art college. So it's pretty rigorous. I mean, all those drawing languages has to be pretty much mastered before your first year in college, and that's their expectation. So, since age 7 up until 17, every day drawings.
So you had training since the age of 7.
Yeah, I mean, my father is a painter. They saw me, and he saw me as his first son, so I had to continue. I don't know.
You were grinding ink. You were doing all the traditional things.
Well, the grinding ink thing was me being a rebel. I mean, my father always see me as a Western painter. I mean, that means oil painting in East Asia. But I choose to do sort of Asian traditional. I mean, my father would say no to that, but I was like, okay, like if you're going to do the West oil painting, I'm going to do a watercolor in the Eastern way. And that was being so that started at my college year, but before then it was just rigorous, like oil painting, water painting, charcoal, and graphite. That has to be done before college. So, but I appreciate all those times. A lot of issues, a lot of questions about like those sort of limited trainings, being an artist, like less creative. But I appreciate those time. Really because I learned how to work with time, how to work with my body, how to maintain my, health, mental health, my body, all that. I've learned that. I've done this training and all those good quality, fundamental quality to become an artist. I appreciate that still.
I'll ask Cayse and Joe, since both of you guys are musicians, does that figure into your practice in any way? I know, Joe, it used to be something that was sort of important in your practice.
Yeah, I guess, what was it, second year of grad school, I started working with installation, and then I had built this kind of cave made out of paper and a bunch of other weird experimental little things here and there, a lot of resin stuff and gravel. But I had layered a bunch of contact mics around the room, so when you walked around the room, it would go through guitar pedals and play back on speakers, just to kind of help immerse you into this environment a bit more. But through building out that cave is when I started to learn I started with parsonage, which you get like my fill my bathtub with powdered charcoal, and I'd sift the paper through my bathtub and make a huge mess. But then I got my hand on all these tanks and started to add even more to those tanks. And the sound bit now is a bit separate. I still record full-length CDs and stuff.
Where can we get them?
Online. They're,
okay.
Yeah. Got lots of different little projects. Yeah. But I kind of keep it separate from the art practice now.
All right. Well, I mean, these things have a way of kind of separating and coming back together, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I've recently started animating with Larkin Ford, another Atlanta artist, and been doing the scores for those animations. So I guess that's the way that it's being used now.
All right.
Yeah.
In case you don't play music anymore, you're not in any bands now?
I'm not playing music, but I'm still practicing. The thing, playing in a band was, it kind of took over, and that was my thing. That was my creative thing for, my wasted youth.
That's right. Good.
Yeah.
I mean, you recorded several CDs, right? You guys had sort of a career and a bit of a tour and all that.
Yeah, we got around, played CBs, that sort of thing.
See, that's classic Texas understatement right there.
Yeah, it was fun. I was interested when Avantika was talking about the lithography being a dying art, and it just brought to mind like SCAD just shut down their painting and sculpture departments, and
is that true?
That's what I heard.
You heard it here, folks. Breaking news.
And it's just this idea that that the art world is so different than what it was when I was coming up, it's some of it's much better, and some of it's like I think they're losing something.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I didn't think I would hear my name and the school you talked about in Savannah in one sentence, but we just did. Anyway, I taught in the foundations program at SCAD for 10 years, and there was something really good about how rigorous it was, and I hope that is still retained. But where I am right now at Washington State University, which is in Vancouver, Washington, not Canada, we have a really small art program, and we're a minor. And in this day and age where everyone wants just things to get bigger and better, our philosophy has been stay small and mighty and see how you can how drawing and physical making, whether it's drawing, painting, design, and critical thinking, can actually serve all the other programs on the university, whether it's neurosciences, engineering, criminal justice. So the way I'm using art and drawing tools at this university is in some ways much more universal and very satisfying. And I think we'll see a reflection of that in the fall, where programs, unfortunately, I think more programs will start shutting down because you're thinking about the viability of those things. So I think drawing and hands-on making will suddenly have a new purpose. But how these hands-on tools connect with the world at large is a conversation I'm interested in
Right.
visiting. Sorry, I sounded way too academic.
Oh, I know. Terrible.
Oh, ew.
What I think is interesting about something about drawing is that it's this, there's this maxim about it. Drawing is to art as the piano is to music. Like you can write a symphony on a piano,
Yeah.
and it sort of goes through the complete art form, and then like a drawing can eventually become the Golden Gate Bridge, or
Yeah.
you know, a building. And it's just this thing that we can't lose. I don't think there's any threat to it, but
No.
it's
Yeah.
just this amazingly important discipline.
That's why you got to carry on drawing.
Oh boy. All right. More, that's another product.
I know.
Well, what and we can wrap things up here. Maybe the last thing, because this exhibition got stopped the day after the opening, that the things that are supposed to grow and change weren't really allowed to grow and change the way they were. But Joe, we have a question about entropy, because the idea, you talked about it a little, that things were going to break down and change in your work. And with Emily Tomlinson's drawing, that was going to change. So every day you go in, it was going to be different and a different kind of relation to the space. How important is entropy, or what role does entropy play?
I mean, I want to take my hand out of it as much as possible. And I guess through grad school, we're learning about like the Gutai movement and then just following the surrealists growing up as well. I want as many surprises as possible. And so trying to kind of step back and keep it unpredictable is pretty important, I guess, and keeping it fun and entertaining. And then just having, things grow and on their own without me being there and having them change over the course of a couple of months is, it always keeps it new and exciting.
No, absolutely. And from my point of view, like knowing that the materials in your tanks are constantly changing felt oddly similar to Marissa's viewers, like not knowing how the viewers are going to behave, or how many times you look in the space and you see somebody's forehead pressed up against the wall or not, you know, and to me, like those were some of the interesting, I guess the mutable parts of the exhibition, the things that could change every time you went. Not that it had to be entropy, but it just that there was change in it. There were like these little alive parts that were still kind of always going to be different. So hopefully people will come and, approach that peephole while a tank full of poison chemicals are growing behind them like an alien fetus.
I will say, Joe, that the water has gone down. So it's naturally, just kind of changing. So if you want me to send you a picture when I'm there next week.
That's probably my fault. I've been drinking it. I hope that's okay. I take a cup out of it every couple days. I feel my immune system's never been stronger. And I'm looking at the clock here, and I just want to make sure that we're respectful of people's time. So if there are any other questions, we can entertain those. Otherwise, I was just going to go around the panelists and just sort of ask you what everybody has coming up, or any sort of great or awesome thing that you've seen out in the art world or wherever. So it could be about you, things you have going on, or about just something you've seen. You want to go first, Cayse, since you're on screen?
Be sure to come to the Zuckerbin and check out the shows TK and Nzinga have done. Really beautiful, Unbound. They've got some work from the Clark Atlanta collection. It's just really, really a cool show. TK's show of Nzinga Oh, excuse me. No, she's the other curator. But come and see the shows out at the Zuckerman, you guys. We could really use your support, and it's a great space.
And you're open on Sundays normally.
Yes, that's right. I think. I mean,
I always appreciate that about the Zuckerman.
Yeah, they've cut back funding so much that there might be some gaps in it, but it's worth the drive. Come on out.
Absolutely. And you have, so go to the Zuckerman, come and see Cayse's show in June. Probably the opening will be Friday, June 5th, probably.
Oh, this is all new to me. Sounds great.
I thought this would be a nice time to let you know. So thank you, Cayse. Who's next on the screen? Marissa, do you want to give a shout out? What's going on?
Yep. So we have 2 Atlanta artists, or former Atlanta artists, that are now in New York right now, that are going to curate our next show at Greenhouse Gallery. So if you guys are in Brooklyn, it was supposed to open this past week, but Amelia Carley and Tyler Beard are co-curating our next show. We're hoping to open it as soon as possible, but it looks like it might end up not being until June. So we'll get that out. But if you guys follow the Instagram page, you'll be able to see what they're doing. But they have a lot of really great artists that are going to be showing work in that exhibition.
And it's Greenhouse, just on Instagram, just Greenhouse Project Space, or just Greenhouse?
It's green 2_ house.
Okay, got it. Who else? Joe, do you have anything brewing?
As far as my own work, I've got some animations that you guys can be just looking out for. That'll include some paintings and things like that there. But my students actually will be having a show towards the end of the semester at the Decatur Perimeter campus in their botanical garden. So they'll be like all of their first time showing. So if you were interested in supporting some of the Georgia State Decatur kids, I would say come out to that. But that date's been pushed back, so I'm not sure when that is yet. And then, I would just say Shower House Gallery's got a bunch coming around the corner as well. So
another
supporting local galleries. Yeah, they got a lot coming up here soon.
And I feel like I've seen your name come up with a lot of like film screenings and animation, as much as sort of conventional art. It's like you're in both worlds kind of equally now.
Trying to get into the animation world a bit more,
okay.
It's really enjoyable, so, and allows me to, like you were saying earlier, combine the music and the painting.
Good. Namwon.
Yep.
What do you have? What do you have coming up, or what?
Yes, I'm supposed to have Gusting Gallery Show, SCAD, Savannah Gallery Show, Library Show. They're supposed to open in May, but we're not sure if it's going to happen or not, since the campus is currently closed. And then, at the End Gallery Show, I'm scheduled to have a show in September. So I hope that's happened.
Yeah, no, we'll have it. I mean, hopefully.
So yes, and then I have a solo show in 2021, March, actually May, yes. So I've been really working on it. I mean, it's a big space to fill in, so I've been really.
And where is it?
In Savannah, Georgia, Laney Contemporary Gallery.
And isn't there a group show there right now?
Their group show, I think they have online show currently.
Okay.
Right, but they were thinking out there. They were talking about having a summer group show, but then again, like in the circumstances, like nobody. I mean, we don't even know if it's going to happen or not. But if it happens, it'll be online show. But I'm looking forward to this, having a show in Laney Contemporary. I mean, Laney Contemporary, and who else represent Georgia last year in Miami?
It was Tiff Siegfrieds from Athens.
Yes.
Yeah, at NADA, both at NADA.
Yeah, so I'm very looking forward to working with Susan Laney next year.
And you're still on the schedule, still working with Sandler Hudson, so we'll keep an eye on that as well. I'm sure they'll have things coming up for you. Avantika, what do you have coming up? I'm sure it's going to be a lot, right?
I hope so. If you're all alive, if all you peaches stay home.
That's right. Well,
Georgia, you can do better.
That's right.
Seriously, no more Tybee, Namwon.
Oh, Tybee is closed.
Oh, good. We can go to the crab shack when I visit, when life is back again. Yeah.
And I like how athletically you've avoided the question. What do you have
No, I
coming?
won't get there, but I'm also, this is a PSA for the southern states that need to be better.
Sure.
So I'm supposed to have a show at Portland Community College in September, where I'm collaborating with Marcus Fisher, who's an experimental musician who was in the last Whitney. I'm hoping that will work out, and it's going to be another show with a lot of scaffolding, and the same scaffolding work will also, an extension of the same project will be shown at the Sculpture Park in Jaipur that I talked about earlier.
Right.
So those are two projects that are showcasing some of my installations. At the same time, the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art in Eugene, Oregon, will have a group show that will include my work. And then the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art in Pullman, Washington, where the main campus of WSU exists, will have a show of faculty work. So yeah, a couple of group shows, some installations, and hopefully something someday soon at the end.
Oh yeah, no, that'll happen for sure.
Yeah, you know what's also interesting is it's almost Easter and we're talking about the end. So maybe there's something about something, resurrecting itself.
Well, that's what they do in Atlanta. You keep bouncing back, the Phoenix, etc.
What about you, Craig?
Me? Oh,
yeah.
See, I was thinking of the other artists in the show. Because Sergio Suarez had a show at Shower House recently here in Atlanta. Emily Tomlinson and Trey and Evie Sala, all extremely hardworking, talented artists. Kojo Griffin has been popping up in shows as well. I'm not sure what's on the horizon, but he was in the temporary project show here in Atlanta. I'm kind of laying low like everybody, waiting to see what happens. But I have a solo show scheduled for Hathaway Gallery in Atlanta. It's supposed to open September 12th. So hopefully that will still be true. A whole new batch of work, working on it every day. And, hopefully it'll be all right.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I want to just say a thank you once again to all the artists who participated in the show, the artists who participated in the panel discussion today, and most of all, Atlanta Contemporary being the anchor for contemporary art here in Atlanta. We thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you, Craig.
Oh, thank you more.
Yeah.
Thank you more.
So, so this is going to be online. We're going to export this. It'll take a minute, and we'll put it up on YouTube and get it up there so it can be shared out with people who weren't able to attend. I'll let you know a few things that are coming up too that are going to be virtual talks and presentations. For those of you who knew about the program, we are bringing back Home is Where the Art Is, and we're doing it virtually. And for those of you yesterday and today that have been looking at the background, I'm starting with my own house, and that'll be on Wednesday, April 15th. You have to be a member to join, but that's something. We're doing a virtual color ATL and Meet the Artists on Thursday night. And then Saturday, April 18th, we have another talk with Discrit. So all of that's on our website, and stay tuned. We'll be updating everyone with regards to what our shows look like as well. So thank you, Craig and Joe and Avantika and Marissa and Cayse and Namwon for taking your time to talk to us about your practice and the work that's on view. And we'll be back and open soon.
Yay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Ta.